ladies and gentlemen. So let's begin today's proceedings, and this is a very special occasion today. And besides the OS and all CIs getting together, it's also a moment to celebrate the launch, the success of Kabir Bedi's book, Stories I Must Tell, and we'd like to felicitate him for that. We have some teachers from our schools who are present here with us today. They've come from far and wide, and we would like to welcome them today. And it's a pleasure that you all are with us, and you've made this very special for us. We appreciate that. So let me get going. Let me welcome Parveen ma'am, who is here with us today. Thank you so much. And we have Mr. Ajitab Bachchan, who has also made it a point to be here like he always does. Thank you, sir. We have Lieutenant Colonel Anil Sabharwal from the 1962 batch. I think that's Ajitab's. This is all Kabir's batch, in fact. They're all mates. I wonder why they're sitting far apart. Is there a message there? I don't know. But maybe it's time to, get back at each other. But wonderful to have you with us. And we also have Group Captain Ravi Raghav. He was driven all the way down from Noida under extremely difficult circumstances, I'm told. We have a very senior OS, Mr. Arjun Ramani, who's with us. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience. You've been extremely kind, but I hope you did make good use of this time by getting yourself a nice drink and chatting to each other, which I did. All right. Now, we will begin with the felicitation of our teaching staff. They come first, as always. No doubt on that. And we all owe where we are today, we owe that to our teachers. So it's extremely appropriate that we begin with them. Some of them are still to arrive. So I have to do a bit of jugglery and, change the sequence. Let me share with you the first teacher we're going to invite on stage, invite up in front, is, the adage is, be it Shakespeare, be it Bernard Shaw, Dickens, Wordsworth, or Robert Frost. No sweat. She got the students to appreciate the fine nuances of the literary magic of all these greats with her sensitivity and aplomb. You guessed it right, of course, English is the subject, no doubt about that, which she taught the ICSC and IIC students from 1998 to 2005. And teaching English, you get a lot of other things to do, so she was also in charge of English elocution for the seniors and dramatics for the juniors. A class teacher for standard 10, and house mistress for 80. Now some of us will not be familiar with this because there were no girls when we were there, but Monty at some point of time decided to do us a favor and tease us and make us feel a little jealous, and he brought in girls. So she was house mistress for Alumni Dale, my house. My house too. So please raise your hands, ladies and gentlemen, as we welcome Mrs. Anusha Sharma. We've heard that so often, all the time. So this teacher frequently said that to the middle school and IIC students, and she was at Sherwood from 2000 to 2015, 15 years. That's an extremely, extremely long time. And she survived the school and did wonders there. Wonderful. A master of many arts, she took on multiple responsibilities. So, tutored the students in elocution, debating, besides directing the students for the school play, she also trained them for the Trinity examination. House mistress for the LJ girls. Little John, where are you, Little John? Any Little John here? Oh, we have some of them, not too many. Huh? But the 80s are still up ahead. The dean for the girls.
But we'll still find it out, don't worry.
I'm sure you will, I'm sure you will. The dean for the girls from 2011 onwards, actively involved in organizing most of the events in the school, and including for founders, of course, part of the responsibility. Currently director at St. Peter's School in Mazgaon. And then her daughter, incidentally, Ikanur Kaur, was head girl of Sherwood, was head girl in 2009. My friends, please clap as we welcome in our midst Mrs. Anita Singh. Before we welcome our next staff member, let me share with you the greatness of an officer and a sportsman. Rajendra Chauhan, an OS of the 1972 batch, a fine sportsman, captain of the under-9, under-4-9 football team. Anyone played under-4-9 here? I did. Okay. And goalkeeper of the college football team, gymnastics captain, went on to join the army and serve the nation on many fronts. Rose to the rank of colonel, was posted in Kashmir, the hotspot, to maintain peace and harmony in the valley. During his call of duty, unfortunately, he was martyred in an IED explosion, a mine explosion, and he left us. We pray that his soul continues to rest in peace. This was many, many years ago, I think 2001, 2000. The teacher we're calling on next is somebody who remained strong, took the reins of a family in her hands. His spouse, I'm sure Colonel Rajendra Chauhan will be very proud of the strong-willed spouse that he had, as she went on to teach at Sherwood from 2001 to 2006, where she taught chemistry, no longer English. Chemistry comes into play. In classes 6 and 7, she was also house mistress for the FT girls. So Friar Tuck, raise your hands. Okay, there you go. So let's show our full support with folded hands. Please welcome Mrs. Hemlata Chauhan. We have two more teachers who are still, they're on their way, and we shall introduce them as and when they get here. So I don't want to spoil the suspense of that. But before that, I also want to introduce you to another teacher, this time from All Saints, too much of Sherwood. A teacher whom I had the privilege to know personally. She joined All Saints in 1965. Initially as a matron, went on to teach art. And I was just told recently that she taught many other subjects as and when required by the girls. Her daughter, Kiran, passed out of All Saints in 1971. Her two sons, Daman and Arjun, in 73 and 77. So all the children studied in Sherwood and All Saints. They would have been here today to join the celebrations. However, fate ordained otherwise. After a long-fought duel with her various illnesses over many years, Mrs. Luthra breathed her last night. She lived a full life as a teacher, wife, mother, housemaker, homemaker. Ladies and gentlemen, together today, let us observe a minute's silence as we celebrate her life and pray that her soul rests in eternal peace. We'd appreciate if one of all of us can stand up for a minute and observe a minute's silence. Let's move on. The Sherwood anthem. I don't know how many of us remember it, because Ranjit said to make us remember, he's got a whole lot of copies for us. But some of you will still remember it, I know. So we have a young girl from Sherwood who's currently still in school. And she has actually recorded the Sherwood anthem and sent it to us. So I will introduce to you Sophia Shipley from the 2022 batch, who is currently going to appear for her ISC examinations. And she is going to lead us as we sing the Sherwood anthem.
Sherwood fair, to thee we sing our song of art and praise. May all the hills with echoes ring until the end of days. May Sherwood's spirit stronger grow with each day's rising sun.
somebody from All Saints here wants to sing the All Saints song, we're all ready. You want to make up one? Hey, if you miss a few words, we'll join you, not a problem. Come on, come on. All right, wonderful.
Oh, when the saints go marching in, I wanna be in that number. Oh, when the saints go marching in. One more time. Oh, when the saints go marching in. Oh, when the saints go marching in. Oh, Lord, I wanna be in that number. When the saints go marching in.
Standing up globally. She did the opening act for Michael Jackson's tour of India many years ago. Best known, as we all know, for a role in Evita. You remember that? In the blockbuster musical which ran for over 5 years, I think it's probably still a record. Today she's a motivational speaker and the CEO of her own events and corporate coaching company, whereby she trains India's corporate leaders on communication skills, presentation skills, besides other areas. None other than a very own alumni from All Saints. Ladies and gentlemen, for you, let me call Sharon.
That song happened because Kabir insisted can Sharon sing a song? So here I am, and we are here on a very, very special occasion, and I have a theory about this occasion. I have a feeling that God looked at a painting and He said, this is such a beautiful painting, but I'm going to make something more beautiful than that painting. And that is how our beautiful, handsome, gorgeous guest star tonight made his entry into the world, into a quiet, spiritual, philosophical family, and from all points of life, that should have been the trajectory of his journey. But oh no, it wasn't. Life had something more in store for him. And in the book, you will be regaled with the turbulence and the volatility and the fun and the excitement. This is a person who took life on and lived it hugely, more than mega king size, and it is a great pleasure and an honor for me to be able to introduce you all into the absolute fantastic narrative of this book. And let's put our hands together for our wonderful star of the hour, Kabir Baby. Kabir, would you like to say a few words before we start?
Firstly, thank you all for coming. I'm really touched that you did. And also those of you that are watching online, thank you. I'm sorry I got a bit delayed coming here. I really pride myself on being on time, but life happens when you make other plans, as Chandran said. You know, I'm so grateful that members of staff are here, Sherwoodians are here, ladies from All Saints are here, ladies from Sherwood are here. So, because being a Sherwoodian and my sister being All Saints, I'm bonded to both. Being a Sherwoodian with a sister in All Saints, I had the privilege of going to All Saints for Brother Sundays, where meeting my sister's friends get to think them a little more than brotherly.
Carrying everybody's letters.
We waited for that Sunday. Always remember
So many memories of Sherwood and All Saints. You know, all of us have been part of the institutions that both these institutions have shaped all of us in so many ways. And for me, I cannot tell you how important Sherwood was for me. Because before joining, I was a fairly indifferent student, intelligent but not focused. And coming to Sherwood gave me that focus. More than Sherwood, beyond Sherwood also, was Llewellyn, Principal Llewellyn. He said, Bailey, you're an intelligent boy, there's no reason you shouldn't get the best marks. And he set me special tasks. And he made me do those things, which made me get first by the time I left, which qualified me to join St. Stephen's. But when it came to the time of the final interview for St. Stephen's, I was down with typhoid. And I appealed to Llewellyn. I said, please sir, I cannot go. Can you please tell them that I'll be able to handle the interview and please admit me to St. Stephen's? And he did. And they listened to him. So I got into St. Stephen's. So, apart from what he did for me in Sherwood, apart from getting me to St. Stephen's, virtually the entire trajectory of my life that followed stemmed from those two moments. And I can never stop thanking Principal Llewellyn, Lou as I call him, for setting my life on that incredible course that it took. With all its ups and downs and joys and sorrows, but a life of great fulfillment. And in 2006, I was performing in a play in London called The Far Pavilions in the London West End. And a fellow Sherwoodian called P.G. Patel came to me and said, you know, Lou is still alive? I said, really? He said, yes, he's living in a monastery in Norfolk. So once they were not performing, PG and I went up to Norfolk, and there was Llewellyn, looking pretty much the same, just more gaunt and a little older, living in a church, in a wing of a church. It was like a small studio apartment, a small kitchen, small bathroom, small bedroom, a bed, a table, a little place to sit. Really Spartan. He seemed to be perfectly content living in those very simple conditions. He always had that feeling of being almost a true monk, a true ascetic. And I was so touched to see him. Then I invited him to see the play, and we had a gathering of Sherwoodians in London, to which so many people came. Even T.G. Patel came from America, and other people came from Canada, people from all over England. And I was able to take him, show him the play, meet after this thing, and thank him for all that he did for me in my life. Until today, I say, if Llewellyn hadn't been in my life, God knows what trajectory it would have taken. But everything I did stemmed from the fact that I went to Sherwood, which got me to St. Stephen's, which led to All India Radio, which in its own way led to my coming to Bombay, advertising, film, Bollywood, Europe, stardom, America, other things. All those things that followed came from what Lou did for me and what Sherwood did for me. So thank you, Sherwood, thank you. I'm most touched that so many of you came and made the journey and came here to honor me and to congratulate me on my book. One of the things that Sherwood taught me was, you know, how to turn misfortunes into fortune by being positive and looking beyond. And when the pandemic came and film work dried up, voiceovers dried up, appearances dried up, foreign films dried up, I sat down and wrote this book in a year of mad, frenzied writing. And it went on to become a national bestseller and won the Amazon Most Popular Book Award 2021. It has been published in Italian, Hungarian, Marathi, many other editions are coming out. So I'm glad I got my basic story out, because if I don't tell my story, who will tell my story? You know? And as many of you who know me know that I'm not the biggest self-promoter or the kind of advertiser in the world. I tend to be a bit reticent and keep things to myself. So this is my way of being able to tell my story, but also tell it not just in terms of achievements, but also in terms of my setbacks, my weaknesses, my strengths, my milestones, my mistakes. It's all out there. And I think that's what touched people about this book. Some people said they were moved to tears when they read my book. Other people said they were inspired. So I'm glad that my life has had that kind of effect. And even before I became an actor, I didn't know what I wanted to do. My parents had been extremely wonderful people who sacrificed everything for the cause of independence. I just knew I wanted to do something that touched people's lives in some way. And in the end, I found that calling by being an actor. And that's what brought me to this point. And actually, I was just thinking that we all graduated in '62. Today is 2022, it's 60 years. 60 years. It's 60 years. So it's the diamond. I've never crossed 50 age-wise. Every year I have my annual 50th birthday. Annual, yeah. But let the celebrations this evening continue. Let's talk, let's have fun, let's share this evening. And I want to thank my wife Parveen Dosanjh for being here, for bringing so much joy in my life, for being, you know, people don't realize this, but we've been together now for 15 years. 16. It's the longest relationship that I've had with any woman, other than my mother. This is counting 3 marriages, 3 divorces, many major relationships. The longest relationship I've had with a woman is with Parveen, and she's brought me the greatest joy. So thank you, Parveen.
So now,
Sharon, over to you.
I absolutely was riveted by the book, Kabir. But what really held me was, see, one can't help being in awe of you because you are this amazing piece of architecture. But when you read the book, you realize that this person with us, he's all heart. He is all heart. He's been pushed off the sea, thrown into the deep end. He's cancelling shoots because his heart was not in the right place, or the person he was with was not in the right place. There are many, many achievements, but for me, that gave me an insight into who he was, and I really, really enjoyed this. So I'm going to dig into what really fascinated me about Kabir, and I literally insisted with Ranjit. I said, I want to do this, I want to look into this and probe it and share it with all of you. So I'm going to dig right in, Kabir. We're going to start at the beginning, where Kabir was in AIR, All India Radio, and he wangled his way to Brian Epstein, who was the manager of the Beatles, and started saying government, 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 and he managed to get some sort of a cursory commitment from Brian to come up to his room for an interview, and of course, our young, handsome Kabir Bedi at that time arrives, and Brian had completely forgotten. So, knock, 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 Brian is with his towel, and then what happened?
Well, I pressured him to give me the interview by saying the government of India had demanded it. And that the Beatles would get into terrible trouble if he didn't give me the interview. So he said, "What nonsense, the boys will not give anybody any interview. I will give them bloody interview." I said, great, great, great. For me, interview Brian Epstein was good enough. So I went up to his room at the appointed hour, knocked on his door. He appeared in a kind of bathrobe. He looked at me and said, "Hello sir, Kabir Bedi, All India Radio. We promised 7 o'clock. He said, "Oh God, I can't do this." So he slammed the door in my face, and I thought, oh God, that's the end of that. But 2 minutes later, he reappeared with trousers under his dressing gown, walked me across the length of the Oberoi Intercontinental to the suite at the other end, knocked on the door. Paul McCartney appeared, and he said, "Boys, do me a favor, give this guy an interview." There I was, with the 4 Beatles, and I was the biggest Beatles fan in the world. Not just because they were great singers and completely blew my mind musically, but they represented the whole 60s and everything that was happening, the excitement of the 60s, the psychedelic clothes, the people demonstrating for peace, the sexual freedom that came with it, the turn on, tune in, drop out slogans, the hippies at San Francisco and Haight-Ashbury. They represented all that for me. So, what happened in the interview, talking to all 4 of them, that's in my book, I'm sure you'd like to know that. But that interview became a turning point for me, because when All India Radio finally broadcast it, and I went to them and said, "Can I have a copy?" They looked at it and said, "There's no copy." I said, "What do you mean there's no copy? I recorded the interview with the Beatles." They recorded some other program over the tape of my Beatles. Because those days they had no money for tapes. They keep using the same tapes. You see how the backroom boys didn't know. I was so shaken by this. I thought, do I really want to work with people like this? That I decided I needed to move on. And that's why I left Delhi with 700 rupees in my pocket to head to Bombay to find some kind of new fortune for myself. So the Beatles interview was really a turning point in my life. Not just because of the achievement of interviewing them, but also the disappointment of my tape being erased by All India Radio.
So now Kabir arrives in Bombay, and the ad world and the film world. I'm going to jump a little bit, and I'm now going to go back to a chapter in your life, because you and Protima made Bombay upside down. And some of your expressions, Kabir, I don't think you realize how cute you are. That's another thing. He says on page 33 of the book, he meets this gorgeous, sultry, and the description is fantastic. Please turn to page 33, and he says, "Hi," I muttered, "my bladder pulsating." And of course, this was like 1,000 tsunamis. Him and Prathama, it was up and down and volatile, but at the same time, his career in Bollywood was building, and there are too many stories here. I'm just going to sum it up, and then I'm going to ask Kabir to elaborate. He had this group, and I remember them all. There was Johnny Bachchan, Mahesh Bhatt, there was, Chetananand, and there was open parties at his house, and films were being made, and it was a glorious time for him. His personal life, which until our darling V came in, his personal life was always the propeller that was, kind of pulling him in 1,000 directions while his career was rocking. So while he was coping with Prathama and, whatever their relationship was, because Prathama, I had a dull moment with that lady and I knew her. Kabir was making great inroads into Bollywood. I just loved one of the stories, but Kabir will tell you many. Apparently, he met O.P. Ralan Saab. O.P. Ralan Saab said, "Meri picture mein kaam karna hai?" So Kabir was saying, "Well, what about my role?" He said, "Role? I am O.P. Ralan, who are you?" So Kabir kept quiet. Apparently, even Zeenat kept quiet. They went on to the film, only to find that Ralan Saab was the lead. There was a middle person, and Kabir and Zeenat were somewhere along the line. So that was one of the little stories. But Kabir, tell us about your wonderful, wonderful victories with Khun, Bari Mang, and all those wonderful stories. Bollywood beckoned and embraced him, and there is much to be discussed about this. Over to you.
My book is called Stories I Must Tell, The Emotional Life of an Actor, because firstly, I have a lot of stories to tell in my book. Secondly, it is told from a very emotional point of view, because I decided I would be emotionally vulnerable and just tell it like it was. For instance, like, I said hi to Prathama, my bladder pulsing. That wasn't a wrong word. My bladder was pulsing because I was dying to pee. And I'd gone into that room to get a key of the executive loo in this advertising company where I worked, and she happened to be sitting there, and I couldn't wait to talk to her because I had to go to the loo. So, but that's how I met her, because I needed to go to the executive loo, which needed a golden key. But it's also a story of what happened in that incredible relationship with Prathama, because she was quite an incredible woman. And how this relationship that began as a sort of free and open relationship became a marriage, and how this marriage, through a series of interesting events which I've cataloged in my book, became an open marriage, and what happens, and how that happens, and what it is to live in an open marriage, what are the consequences of that. I won't get into the details. It's just that process of that journey I shared. I've never, I think one thing about my book is I've not had any malice towards anyone. People made mistakes, I made mistakes. In many ways, Prathama and I grew up together. We learned things together. And in the end, we shared 2 beautiful children. And for all the upheavals that happened when I began my relationship with Parveen Babi and went to Italy and became a star, Prathama and I managed to remain friends till the end of her life, when she tragically died in a landslide. But my book is really an exploration of my emotional state. So I went through my successes and failures, relationships that went beautifully, relationships that ended sadly. And that's the journey that I had. And I think telling it in a way that was honest has touched people more than anything else. And that's what I wanted. That's what I wanted. I wanted to tell my story as honestly as I could. Because everyone has stories to tell. But if you just tell a story of the highlights of your life, all the wonderful things that happened to you, who's interested? They want to know where you feel. They want to know what mistakes you made. They want to know you're the human being, not as a superhero. That's what I tried. That's why I think the book worked.
I think it's so touching on page 93 that you reminisce about when Prathama left all of us tragically. I mean, you know, it turned all our lives upside down with this unprecedented episode. And you say that all you were left with were her passport. And you said, in the end, I'm left holding an old letter, reading what Prathama said of life decades before her last pilgrimage. Kabir, if you don't mind, may I take the liberty of asking you to read this beautiful bit of prose that she wrote and you were left with. It's really beautiful.
This was Prathama wrote to me. The importance of one's life dawns on one, and with it a sense of purpose and direction, and an incredible feeling of awe when one realizes what is truly the wisdom of the ancients and how deep and true the real meaning of religion. I know how destiny works and how the karmic cycle is endless, and I also know that it doesn't end with death, but it's just a sheer veil between this and the other birth, the other, the next life, and we shall meet again.
Beautiful. So beautiful, so beautiful. Now I'm very tempted from a very selfish point of view to discuss Alex and Kabir's adventure when Alec set his eyes on Kabir and decided, I'm going to take this man's clothes off. He's too beautiful to be real. And so Alec designed So Kabir, I read this book, I mean, back and forth, and literally know it by heart because I was so fascinated by it. And the opening scene of Tughlaq was with Kabir. I'm going to ask Kabir to read this out, and all the ladies in the audience went, Now why did this happen? Kabir, here you are, page 59, top of the paragraph. 59. This is Kabir's entry on stage, first production, and this was his debut, the first visual sight of him.
So, Tughlaq was the story of this Mughal emperor, well before the Mughals, who was regarded as the mad king. Girish Karnad's first play, and his thesis was that Tughlaq was really a king ahead of his time, because he designed token currency. He wanted to move the capital of India from Delhi to the south, because every time any invader from the north came, they conquered the whole of India just by taking Delhi. So, it's a very wonderful play, which had Bombay's best actors at the time, Sabira Merchant, Jasmine Kuna, Vijay Krishna, Farooq Mehta, so many wonderful actors. And Alec wanted to make this play into a real spectacular. So he started with this very spectacular opening scene, where basically when the curtain rises, opens, you see me standing back to the audience, looking absolutely naked. And then the attendants come on, dress him, and he turns to the crowd and he begins to speak. But here's how I described it. As the curtains parted, I stood with my back to the audience, arms outstretched, stark naked. Or so it seemed. Lights from above concealed the string that held the loincloth which covered me in front. From the back, every muscle defined, I looked naked as a Roman statue. People gasped on seeing me naked as the royal attendants came on and dressed me in emperor's robes. The mad king turned to the audience and began addressing the crowds. The play's success made me famous in Mumbai's high society. Cynics claim my butt made Tughlaq a record-breaking engagement. But it was a great play by Girish Karnad, one of India's most honored playwrights. Its success came from the great characters he created and the mesmerizing story he crafted. My performance got terrific reviews, producers came calling, and I began my journey in Bollywood. Alec Padamsee launched me as a professional actor, and I have always thanked him for it.
Thank you. And then, of course, Kabir went on to do other productions with Alec. He did Marat Saad, and then he did Othello. So I'm going to...
And Gidare, vultures.
Gidare, vultures also. That's
Which is
a
the
big
look.
poster outside his house. So
Hello.
I have to tell you a fascinating story about... So there was little Desdemona, there was Kabir. So now they were rehearsing in our drawing room. Unknown to any of us, sparks had started flying. So I have to talk about my daughter as far as this is concerned. So nobody knew anything. I still don't know what was happening, you know, till they got married. So apparently then Nikki told me later on, when Kabir married Nikki told me, I think she was in London, and she rang me, she said, listen, I have to tell you this amazing story, because she'd seen Shahzan growing up and all that. So Shahzan was this little baby in the house, and she goes to Nikki. She says, and she didn't know English, though. She says, "Idhar aa." So Nikki said, "Yeah, what is it?" "Tu Kabir ka hai." But Othello was spectacular.
Yeah, and you know, I was playing Othello, and Nikki, blonde, blue-eyed, fair, was Desdemona. And the kind of chemistry on stage kind of extended itself into our lives. And so, since we began an affair during the production of the play, while rehearsing the play, we didn't want anyone to know because she was married at the time. And so, in our scenes while rehearsing, we pretended there was no passion. And I'd say, "What is this? This brother and sister? I want passion, real passion." He said, "Alec, we're trying, we're trying." He said, "I want real passion." So eventually, when we performed on the screen, on the stage for the real audience, of course, there was real passion. But Alec drove himself mad, saying these people just have no chemistry. Little did he know what chemistry we had off screen, off stage.
So I want to take you back, Kabir, a little bit, because I want to go back now. Now that Bollywood was literally, you know, you were cemented there very much as a pillar of success. You then, the next big thing happened. My friends, can we request everybody to please sit down? This is going to take a few minutes. I would appreciate if you all can just come up and sit down and share this evening with us. Thank you. So, now Europe beckoned. And actually, Kabir, I was surprised at your body of work. You see, we were so mesmerized with Octopussy and Sandokan, but I mean, there was Franco Zeffirelli, there was Gina Lollobrigida, you met Bernardo Bertolucci, and all these wonderful people. Also, at that time, like I told you, this is a man with all heart. He was now wrestling with the emotions of the next lady in his life, who was Parveen Babi. But I mean, his achievements you must read about, because it's I mean, even just as a clinical resume, it is just absolutely awesome. But what struck me was he was also dealing and giving his time. I mean, so many of us, we get caught up in work and somebody calls from home, can't be busy. But he didn't do that. He was acknowledging and nurturing her because she needed the care. But he also had this amazing canvas of work in Europe, and he was really turning Europe on its head. Am I right, Kabir?
Yeah, I mean, the chapter that I wrote on my success in Italy, which is quite spectacular. I mean, the Sandokan television show that I did broke every broadcasting record. 27 million people viewing in a country of 60 million. That record has not been broken till today. But that kind of stardom was accompanied in my life by the immense love that I felt for Parveen, while she was slowly spiraling into mental problems and severe schizophrenia as it developed. So this kind of strange Jugabandi of extraordinary success at one level and extraordinary trauma at the other level, I was like a parallel thread running through this chapter on my success in Italy. And I think it was a statement of what I was going through, because it's not easy to deal with the joy of success and the and the sadness of a relationship breaking up because the person's mind is breaking down. And all that followed from there, and all the scenes and the events and everything that followed, is a very, very difficult time. At a time when you should really be dancing on the rooftops and celebrating. So that's also part of my story. And I think you can only fully understand it when you read it as I've written it.
And so now, you know, to tie up everything, you know, great successes, great experiences, great relationships. You know, Kabir has had a journey with his children and his family and all that, and it's all in the book. There are happy times, there are sad times, and so I really want to tie this up, Kabir. I want to ask you just one or two small questions, because I'm sure the audience is dying to ask you questions. If you had to do it all over again, you know, giving so much of yourself here, or giving so much of yourself here, or what, I mean, if you had to redesign the trajectory of your life, how would you re-script it?
You know, that's an impossible question to answer, because you can't go back. If I look back, of course, I have many regrets. There are many things I would have done very differently. But would they have got me to where I am today? I might have gone down some other path completely. Who knows? One doesn't know these things. These are the what-ifs of life. My sense is that whatever I went through taught me some very important lessons, but it made me, gave me great joy, gave me great suffering also, many of the things. But in the end, and I suffered enormous reverses, both in terms of the loss of my son, in terms of financial reverses that I suffered because of bad investments in my American days. But when I reconstructed my life and went on to win Italy's highest civilian award, to get that, I knew I must have done something right. So it's impossible to say whether, if I had done something wrong, I would have had those successes as well or not. But the fact of the matter is, yes, if I had to do it again, there's many things I'd do differently. Would the outcome have been as good? Who knows?
But you know, it's really interesting, because as you read it and you see that he's torn with this while this is happening, and so at one point I was thinking, oh my God, if I was directing his life, I would say, pull back from here, give yourself this. It was so tempting, but that's the use of his words. It's so beautifully written in the book, and you know, I do hope that all of you will take the opportunity to read this. So my last question that I want to ask you is, what would this Kabir tell a younger Kabir starting that whole cycle again?
This Kabir would tell that Kabir, be very careful about which relationships you get into. Think far more deeply before you actually commit yourself to larger relationships, and think very deeply about how each relationship can affect you. Because often we enter a relationship thinking it's a short-term relationship, and then one thing leads to another, and the person may not be the best person for a long-term relationship, as a marriage, as an ongoing relationship. And to learn that the hard way is sometimes very painful. However, I do want to say that even though I wasn't able to stay married and see through 3 of my marriages, I did get a lot from the women in the marriages, and I do regard it as one of my achievements, is that I managed to remain friends with all my ex-wives, even though I'm married now with the 4th time.
And I do want to add the peace and the joy that V brings to Kabir's life is beautifully structured in the book. And you know, as we who have seen Kabir through all his volcanic episode of life, really, my love, you are remarkable. I want to ask anybody, does anybody want to ask Kabir any questions, or actually don't? Read the book. What do you suggest?
Yes, and don't give away the whole book either.
No, I've stopped. There's another
This is what
page.
happened when I started promoting my book. I talked so much about it. At the end, says, by the way, this story to sun liya aapne.
So we say no more, and I think it's time now. I think let's just give Kabir a nice, beautiful round of applause for this wonderful. Thank you.